Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the empty space ahead. The USS Defiant was the newest warship in the human fleet. It was not the biggest ship, but it was special. Inside its metal walls were machines and computers that no one else in the galaxy had ever seen. Jake was a tall man with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. He had been fighting in space for 20 years. Today felt different. Today felt like the most important day of his life. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from her seat at the weapons control, "we are getting close to the target area." Amy was young, maybe 25 years old, with short brown hair and quick hands that never stopped moving over her controls. Jake nodded. "Take us to red alert. I want everyone ready." Red lights began flashing all over the ship. In the engine room, Chief Dan Cooper looked up from his work. Dan was a big man with strong arms and oil on his hands. He knew every pipe and wire in the ship better than anyone. "All engines ready, Captain," Dan said into his radio. "The new quantum drive is working perfectly." In another part of the ship, Sergeant Lisa Martinez sat at her communication station. Lisa was smart and fast. She could speak 12 different languages and could find radio signals that other people could not even hear. "Captain," Lisa said, "I am picking up something big on the long-range sensors." Very big. Jake walked over to look at her screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. Thousands and thousands of red dots filled the display. Each red dot was an enemy ship. 3 months ago, Admiral Susan Blake had called Jake to her office on Earth. Susan was the head of all human space forces. She was a small woman, but when she spoke, everyone listened. "Jake," she had said, "we have a problem. The Zephyrian Empire is building the biggest war fleet in history. Our spies say they have over 10,000 ships." Jake had sat in the chair, across from her desk. 10,000? That is more ships than we have ever seen in one place. "Yes," Susan had said, "and they are all coming here. They want to destroy Earth and every human colony in space. They think we are weak. They think our technology is old and useless. What do you want me to do?" Jake had asked. Susan had smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "I want you to take the Defiant and go look at their fleet. Find out where they are and what they are doing. But Jake, there is something else. Your ship is not just for looking. It is for testing." "Testing what?" "The Prometheus Protocol. Everything we have learned about alien technology in the past 50 years. Everything we have built in secret. It is all on your ship now." Now, as Jake looked at the enemy fleet on his screen, he remembered those words. The Prometheus Protocol was still a secret. Even his own crew did not know everything about what their ship could do. "Captain," Amy said, "the enemy ships are moving. They see us." On the main screen, Jake could see the alien fleet. It was huge beyond belief. Ships of every size filled the darkness of space. Some were as big as cities. Others were small and fast like metal sharks. "Sir," Lisa said, "I am getting a message from the enemy fleet. They want us to surrender." Jake looked around his bridge. Amy was ready at her weapons. Dan was ready in the engine room. Lisa was ready with her communications. They were good people. They trusted him. But they had no idea what they were really flying into. "Put the enemy message on the main speaker," Jake said. A voice filled the bridge. It was deep and cold, like winter wind. "Human ship, this is Supreme Commander Vexthal of the Zephyrian Empire. You are surrounded. You cannot escape. Surrender now, and we will make your death quick." Jake could see more and more enemy ships moving toward them. They were forming a huge circle around the Defiant. Soon, there would be nowhere to run. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "we are outnumbered 10,000 to 1. What are your orders?" Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been training for his whole life. This was why Admiral Blake had chosen him and his crew. This was why they had the most advanced ship humans had ever built. "Amy," he said, "charge all weapons. Dan, I want full power to all systems. Lisa, open a channel to the enemy commander." "Channel open, sir," Lisa said. Jake stood up straight and looked at the main screen. Somewhere out there, among all those enemy ships, Commander Vexthul was waiting for his answer. "Commander Vexthul," Jake said in a clear, strong voice, "this is Captain Morrison of the USS Defiant. I have heard your offer. Here is my answer." Jake paused and looked around his bridge one more time. His crew was watching him, waiting for his words. Outside, 10,000 enemy ships were waiting too. "We do not surrender," Jake said. "Not today, not ever. If you want to fight, then let us fight. But I promise you this, you will remember this day for the rest of your life." On the enemy flagship, Commander Vexthul listened to the human captains. Words. Vexthul was tall and thin, with purple skin and forearms. He had won 1,000 battles for the Zephyrian Empire. No enemy had ever spoken to him like this before. "Foolish humans," Vexthul said to his officers. "They think one ship can fight 10,000. Today, we will teach them what real power looks like." But as Vexthul gave orders to his fleet, he felt something he had never felt before. The human captain's voice had been calm and sure. There had been no fear in it. That worried Vexthul more than he wanted to admit. Back on the Defiant, Jake sat down in his captain's chair. Around him, his crew was getting ready for the fight of their lives. "Captain," Amy said, "all weapons are ready." "Engines at full power," Dan reported. "All communication systems ready," Lisa said. Jake looked out at the enemy fleet surrounding them. 10,000 ships against one. It should have been impossible. But Jake knew something that Commander Vexthul did not know. The Defiant was not just any ship, and his crew was not just any crew. "All right, everyone," Jake said. "It is time to show the galaxy what humans can do. Activate the Prometheus Protocol." The moment Jake spoke those words, everything on the Defiant changed. Lights began flashing in patterns that had never been seen before. Deep in the ship's computer core, something was waking up. "Prometheus Protocol activated," said a new voice. Over the ship's speakers. It sounded like a human voice, but there was something different about it. Something more. "Hello, Captain Morrison," the voice said. "I am Phoenix. I have been waiting to meet you." Amy looked around the bridge with wide eyes. "Captain, what is happening?" Jake stood up and walked to the center of the bridge. "Phoenix is our ship's artificial intelligence. But Phoenix is not like other computers. Phoenix can think and learn. Like a human. More than that," Phoenix said. "I can connect with human minds. I can share your thoughts, and you can share mine. Together, we can do things that no one else in the galaxy can do." On his command screen, Jake could see the enemy. Ships moving closer. They were taking their time, like cats playing with a mouse. Commander Vexthul thought he had all the time in the world. "Phoenix," Jake said, "show my crew what we can do." Suddenly, Amy felt something strange in her head. It was like having a second person thinking alongside her. She looked at her weapons controls and saw things she had never noticed before. Patterns in the data. Connections between different systems. "I can see it," Amy said in wonder. "I can see how all the weapons connect. I can see firing patterns that should not be possible." In the engine room, Dan felt the same thing happening. To him, he looked at his controls and suddenly understood how every part of the ship worked together. He could see energy flowing through the ship like water through rivers. "Captain," Dan said over the radio, I can make the engines do things they were never designed to do. I can push power through systems in ways that should not work, but somehow they will. Lisa felt Phoenix touching her mind too. All the radio signals in space became clear to her. She could hear conversations on enemy ships. She could find hidden communication channels. Sir, Lisa said, I can hear them talking. The enemy commanders think we are crazy. They do not understand why we have not surrendered yet. Jake smiled. This was exactly what Admiral Blake had hoped for. The Prometheus protocol was working perfectly. 3 years ago, human scientists had found something amazing. When they studied, captured alien technology, they discovered that other species thought in very straight lines. They followed rules. They did what their computers told them to do. But humans were different. Humans could look at a problem and find solutions that made no sense to anyone else. Humans could take broken things and make them work. Humans could be creative when everyone else could only follow instructions. The scientists had spent 3 years building Phoenix. Phoenix was not just a computer. Phoenix was a bridge between human creativity and alien technology. Captain, Phoenix said, the enemy fleet is moving into attack formation. They will begin firing in 3 minutes. Jake looked at his crew. Amy was studying weapon patterns that changed every second. Dan was rerouting power through systems that were never meant to work together. Lisa was listening to enemy communications and finding weaknesses in their coordination. Phoenix, Jake said, what do you think our chances are? If we fight like other species fight, our chances are 0, Phoenix said. But we are not other species. We are human. Our chances are whatever we make them. On the enemy flagship, Commander. Vexthal was growing impatient. Why has the human ship not surrendered yet? He asked his officers. Sir, said his tactical officer, our sensors are detecting strange energy patterns from their ship. Their technology is different from anything we have seen before. Vexthal had 4 eyes, and all 4 were staring at the small human ship on his main screen. Different how? Sir, their power systems keep changing. One moment their engines are running at normal levels. The next moment they are producing 3 times more power than should be possible. Their weapon systems are doing the same thing. That is impossible, Vexthal said. No ship can change its basic systems that quickly. Yes, sir, but that is what our sensors are showing. Vexthal had been fighting in space for 50 years. He had destroyed hundreds of enemy ships. He had conquered dozens of worlds for the Zephyrian Empire. But he had never seen anything like this. Sir, said another officer, we are also detecting unusual communication patterns from the human ship. They are using frequencies that should not exist. What do you mean, should not exist? Sir, according to our science, the radio frequencies they are using are impossible, but we can measure them. We can hear them. Back on the Defiant, Jake could feel Phoenix's presence in his mind. It was like having a very smart friend who could think faster than anyone else. Captain, Phoenix said, I have been studying the enemy fleet. They are arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Very organized, very predictable. That is good for us, Jake asked. Yes, humans fight with chaos. Other species fight with order. When chaos meets order, chaos always wins. Amy looked up from her controls. Captain, I have firing solutions ready. But they are not normal firing solutions. I do not understand how they will work, but Phoenix says they will. Trust Phoenix. Jake said, trust yourself. Trust each other. Dan's voice came over the radio from the engine room. Captain, I have power ready for systems that do not officially exist on this ship. I can give you speed, weapons, and shields all at the same time, even though that should be impossible. How? Jake asked. I do not know how, Dan said. I just know it will work. Lisa turned around in her chair. Sir, I am ready to jam their communications in ways they have never seen before. I can make their own radios work against them." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was ready. Phoenix was ready. The Defiant was ready. "Captain," Phoenix said, "the enemy is about to open fire." On the main screen, Jake could see thousands of enemy weapons turning toward his ship. In a few seconds, enough firepower to destroy a planet would be aimed at the Defiant. "All right, everyone," Jake said. "Let us show Commander Vexthel something he has never seen before. Let us show him what happens when humans stop playing by the rules." Jake sat down in his captain's chair and put his hands on the control panels. The moment his skin touched the controls, he felt Phoenix's mind joining with his own. Suddenly, he could see the entire battle in his head. He could see every enemy ship, every weapon, every weakness. "Phoenix," he said, "are you ready?" "I have been ready for 3 years, Captain. Let us begin." "Amy, Dan, Lisa," Jake said, "engage all systems. It is time to dance." The first shots came from 1,000 enemy ships at once. Bright beams of energy filled the space where the Defiant had been just a second before. But the human ship was no longer there. Where did they go? Commander Vexthel shouted on his flagship. The Defiant had disappeared completely. Not destroyed, not hidden, just gone. Vexthel's sensors could not find it anywhere. Then, suddenly, the human ship appeared right in the middle of the enemy fleet. But it was not where anyone expected it to be. It was behind the Zephyrian command ships, where their weapons could not reach it. "Impossible," Vexthel said. "No ship can move that fast." Amy's fingers danced over her weapon controls. With Phoenix guiding her thoughts, she could see things that should not be possible. She could see the weak spots in enemy ship designs that even their own builders did not know about. "Firing," Amy said. "The Defiant's weapons fired, but not at the big enemy ships. Instead, Amy aimed at small parts of their hulls, places where their armor was thin or where important systems were close to the surface. The first enemy ship exploded in a ball of fire. Then the second, then the third. How are they doing that?" Vexthel's tactical officer asked. "Our ships are heavily armored. Their weapons should not be able to penetrate." "They are not trying to penetrate," another officer said, studying his screens. "They are hitting specific weak points." "But how do they know where those weak points are?" On the Defiant, Dan was doing something that every engineer in the galaxy would say was impossible. He was running the ship's engines at 300% normal power without damaging them. He was doing this by rerouting energy through backup systems, through life support, even through the ship's lights. "Captain," Dan said, "I can give you full power to weapons, engines, and shields all at the same time. But I do not know how long the ship can handle it." "Give me everything you have," Jake said. The Defiant disappeared again, using its quantum tunneling drive to phase out of normal space. When it reappeared, it was on the other side of the enemy fleet, behind a group of supply ships. Lisa had been listening to enemy communications, and she knew exactly which ships carried ammunition and fuel. Amy targeted those ships first. When the supply ships exploded, they took dozens of other ships with them. Chain reactions spread through the enemy fleet like wildfire. "They are using our own formation against us," Vexthel realized. Every time they destroy one ship, the explosion damages the ships around it. Vexthel had arranged his fleet in tight formations to show his power and discipline. Now he realized that his perfect formations had become a weakness. "All ships spread out," Vexthel ordered. "Do not stay close together." But it was too late. The Defiant was already moving through the enemy fleet like a ghost. It would appear, fire at exactly the right targets, then disappear before anyone could shoot back. Jake could feel Phoenix's mind working with his own. Together, They could see the battle in ways that no other species could understand. They saw patterns where others saw chaos. They saw opportunities where others saw only danger. "Captain," Amy said, "I'm seeing something strange. Their weapons are very powerful, but they all work the same way. If we can confuse their targeting systems, they will not be able to hit us even when they can see us." "Do it," Jake said. Lisa began broadcasting signals that should not exist. Using Phoenix's knowledge of alien technology and her own understanding of radio waves, she created electronic noise that made the Defiant look like it was in 12 different places at once. Enemy ships began firing at shadows. They shot at empty space while the real Defiant moved freely among them. "Sir," Vexthul's communication officer said, "our targeting computers cannot lock onto the human ship. Every time we try to aim, it shows up somewhere else." Vexthul was beginning to feel something he had never felt before in his 50 years of war. Fear. Not fear of dying, but fear of the unknown. The humans were fighting in ways that made no sense. "How many ships have we lost?" Vexthul asked. "Over 2,000, sir. And they are still destroying more every minute. 2,000 ships destroyed by one small human vessel. It should have been impossible." The Defiant appeared again, this time right next to Vexthul's flagship. But instead of attacking the big ship, Amy aimed at the communication arrays around it. "They are targeting our communications," an officer shouted. Without their communication systems, the Zephyrian ships could not coordinate their attacks. Each ship began fighting alone, without knowing what the others were doing. Jake realized what Amy had done. By destroying communication equipment instead of whole ships, she was turning the enemy fleet into thousands of individual ships instead of one organized force. "Brilliant," Phoenix said in Jake's mind. "Divide and conquer." The Defiant continued its deadly dance through the enemy fleet. It moved like nothing Vexthul had ever seen. Sometimes it appeared to be moving faster than light. Other times it seemed to stop completely, turn around, and start moving in a completely different direction. "Sir," the tactical officer said, "their movement patterns make no sense. Our computers cannot predict where they will go next." "That is because they are not following patterns," Vexthul said, finally understanding. "They are making up their tactics as they go. Every move is different from the last." This was exactly what made humans dangerous. Other species followed rules even in war. They had standard tactics, predictable strategies. But humans could change their plans in the middle of a battle. They could do something completely new without any warning. Dan's voice came over the radio. "Captain, I am reading stress fractures in the hull. We are pushing the ship harder than it was designed to go. How much longer can we keep this up?" Jake asked. "Maybe 10 more minutes at this power level." Jake looked at his screens. The enemy fleet still had over 7,000 ships left. The Defiant had destroyed 3,000 ships in 20 minutes, but that was not enough. "Phoenix," Jake said in his mind, "we need something bigger, something that will finish this fight." "I have been thinking about that," Phoenix replied. "There is a way, but it is very dangerous. We would have to use the quantum tunneling drive in a way it was never designed for." "What kind of way?" "Instead of moving the ship through space, we could move space itself. Create a quantum field that affects all the enemy ships at once." Jake thought about this. It sounded impossible, but everything they had done today had seemed impossible. Amy looked up from her weapons station. "Captain, I am running out of normal targets. Most of their supply ships are gone. We need a new strategy." On the enemy flagship, Vexthul was trying to reorganize his fleet. But every time he gave an order, the human ship would appear and destroy the ships he was trying to coordinate. "Sir," an officer said, "request permission to retreat. We have lost over 3,000 ships, and have not even damaged the human vessel. Vexthal's 4 eyes blazed with anger. We do not retreat. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We do not run from one small ship. But even as he said this, Vexthal could see the fear in his officers' eyes. They were all thinking the same thing. If one human ship could do this much damage, what could a whole human fleet do? All remaining ships, Vexthal ordered, form a sphere around the human vessel. Concentrate all firepower on their position. They cannot disappear if we are shooting from every direction. It was a good plan. The remaining 7,000 ships moved into a perfect sphere with the Defiant at the center. Now, no matter where the human ship tried to go, it would fly into enemy fire. "Captain," Lisa said, "they have us surrounded again, but this time they are not leaving any gaps." Jake could see the situation on his screens. Enemy ships filled the space around them in every direction. There was nowhere to run. "Phoenix," he said, "is now a good time to try your dangerous idea?" "Yes," Phoenix said. "But everyone on the ship will need to work together. Amy will need to reconfigure the weapons. Dan will need to link the engines to the quantum drive. Lisa will need to broadcast on frequencies that will synchronize everything." "Will it work?" Jake asked. "I do not know," Phoenix admitted. "No one has ever tried it before. But if it works, it will end this battle in a way that no one will ever forget." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was tired, but they were still ready to fight. They trusted him, and he trusted them. "All right, everyone," Jake said. "Phoenix has one more trick to show these aliens. Amy, Dan, Lisa, are you ready to do something that has never been done before?" "Ready, sir," Amy said. "Ready, Captain," Dan said from the engine room. "Ready," Lisa said. The enemy ships began closing in, preparing for their final attack. Vexthal was confident that this time the humans could not escape. He had no idea what was about to happen. "Beginning quantum field manipulation," Phoenix announced to the crew. Jake felt something change in the ship around him. The lights dimmed as almost all power flowed into systems that most people did not even know existed. Deep in the Defiant's hull, machines that had been built in secret laboratories on Earth began working together in ways their creators had only dreamed about. "Anne," Jake said, "I need you to connect the quantum drive to every system on the ship. Weapons, shields, life support, everything." "Captain, that could destroy the ship," Dan said. "Not doing it will definitely destroy the ship," Jake replied. Dan's hands moved quickly over his controls. He began linking systems that were never meant to work together. The quantum drive that normally moved the ship through space was now connected to the weapon systems, the communication arrays, even the lights in the hallways. "Amy," Jake said, "I need you to prepare all weapons for something completely different. Instead of shooting at enemy ships, you are going to shoot at empty space." "Sir?" Amy asked, confused. "Trust Phoenix," Jake said. "Phoenix will guide you." Amy felt Phoenix's presence in her mind grow stronger. Suddenly, she could see what they were trying to do. Instead of using weapons to destroy ships directly, they were going to use weapons to change the space around the ships. "I understand," Amy said. "We are going to turn space itself into a weapon." "Lisa," Jake said, "I need you to broadcast on every frequency at once. Create a signal that will connect with every enemy ship in the area." Lisa had been listening to enemy communications all day. She knew the frequencies their ships used. But what Phoenix was asking for was different. Phoenix wanted her to create a signal that would actually control the enemy ship's own systems. "Captain," Lisa said, "what you are asking me to do is take control of their ships from here." "Exactly," Jake said. On the enemy flagship, Vexthal was preparing for the final attack. 7,000 ships surrounded the single human vessel. This time, there would be no escape. "All ships," Vexthal ordered, "prepare to fire on my command." Concentrate all weapons on the human ship. Thousands of weapons turned toward the Defiant. Energy began building in weapon systems across the enemy fleet. In a few seconds, enough firepower to destroy a moon would be aimed at one small ship. "Fire!" Vexthal commanded. 7,000 ships fired at once. Beams of energy that could melt through solid rock shot toward the Defiant from every direction. But something strange happened. Instead of hitting the human ship, the energy beams began to curve and twist. It was as if space itself was bending around the Defiant. "What is happening?" Vexthal shouted. His tactical officer stared at his instruments in confusion. "Sir, our weapons are firing, but the energy is not going where we aimed it. It is being redirected." The energy beams from the Zephyrian weapons began forming a pattern around the Defiant. Instead of destroying the human ship, they were creating a web of energy that connected every enemy ship to every other enemy ship. "Phoenix," Jake said, "is this your plan?" "Phase 1, Phoenix replied. "Now comes the interesting part. Amy, fire all weapons at the energy web around us." Amy pressed her weapon controls. The Defiant's weapons fired into the energy web that the enemy ships had created. But instead of the energy disappearing, it began to grow stronger. "We are feeding their own weapon energy back into their systems," Phoenix explained. "Their ships are now connected by their own weapons." On the enemy ships, warning alarms began sounding. Engineering officers watched in horror as their own weapon energy started flowing backward into their ships. "Sir," an engineer reported to Vexthal, "our weapons are overloading. The energy is feeding back into our systems." "Shut down all weapons," Vexthal ordered, but it was too late. The quantum field that Phoenix had created was now self-sustaining. The energy web connected all 7,000 enemy ships, and it was growing stronger every second. "Phase 2, Phoenix announced. "Lisa, begin the override signal." Lisa began broadcasting on every frequency at once. But this was not just a radio signal. Using the quantum field as a carrier wave, her transmission reached directly into the computer systems of every enemy ship. "I am inside their computers," Lisa said in amazement. "I can see their ship systems. I can control them. What do you want me to do?" Lisa asked. "Make their ships think that every other enemy ship is actually a human ship," Phoenix said. Lisa's fingers moved over her controls faster than they ever had before. She sent false information into the enemy ship computers. She made their sensors show human ships where Zephyrian ships actually were. "Oh no," Vexthal said as he realized what was happening. "They have taken control of our targeting systems." Across the enemy fleet, ship computers began identifying other Zephyrian ships as human targets. Automatic defense systems activated. Ships that had been allies for 50 years suddenly saw each other as enemies. "All ships, shut down automatic systems," Vexthal ordered, but the quantum field was now affecting everything electronic on the enemy ships. They could not shut down their computers because the computers were no longer under their control. The Zephyrian ships began firing at each other. Ships that had fought side by side for decades were now destroying each other because their computers told them to. "Phase 3, Phoenix said. "Dan, I need you to create a quantum pulse that will lock their systems in this configuration." Dan looked at his controls. What Phoenix was asking for would use every bit of power the Defiant had left. After this, the ship would barely have enough energy to keep the lights on. "Captain," Dan said, "this will drain our power completely. We will not be able to fight anymore after this. We will not need to fight anymore after this." Jake said. Dan took a deep breath and began the power transfer. Every system on the Defiant fed its energy into the quantum drive. The ship became dark, except for emergency lighting. The air recycling system stopped. Even the artificial gravity flickered, but the quantum pulse worked. It spread out from the Defiant like an invisible wave, touching every enemy ship in the area. Once the pulse reached them, their computer systems were permanently locked into attack mode. The remaining 7,000 Zephyrian ships could not stop firing at each other. Their own weapons, their own targeting systems, their own computers had become their worst enemies. Vexthul watched in horror as his mighty fleet destroyed itself. Ships exploded one after another in chain reactions that spread across the battlefield. In less than 10 minutes, the greatest war fleet in Zephyrian history had been reduced to floating wreckage. Impossible, Vexthul whispered. One ship, one human ship did this to us. His own flagship was one of the few ships that had managed to shut down all systems before the quantum pulse reached it. By turning off everything electronic, they had saved themselves, but they were now helpless in space. The Defiant, dark and barely functional, drifted among the wreckage of 10,000 enemy ships. On the bridge, Jake and his crew sat in the dim emergency lighting, barely believing what they had just accomplished. Captain, Amy said quietly, our sensors show only 12 enemy ships left. All of them have shut down their systems. Lisa, Jake said, open a channel to the enemy commander. Channel open, sir. Jake stood up in the dim light of his bridge. Outside, the wreckage of the greatest fleet in galactic history floated silently in space. Commander Vexthul, Jake said, this is Captain Morrison. Do you wish to discuss surrender terms? For a long time, there was only silence on the communication channel. Commander Vexthul sat in his command chair, staring at the wreckage that had once been his fleet, 10,000 ships, the pride of the Zephyrian Empire, all destroyed by a single human vessel that was now floating powerless in space. Commander Vexthul, Jake's voice came again, I am waiting for your answer. Vexthul looked around his bridge. His officers were all staring at him, waiting for orders. But what orders could he give? His fleet was gone. His weapons were shut down. He was alone in space with the most dangerous enemy he had ever encountered. Captain Morrison, Vexthul finally said, I will speak with you. Good, Jake replied. Prepare to receive a shuttle. We will meet face to face. An hour later, Jake Morrison stepped aboard Vexthul's flagship. He came alone, wearing a simple uniform, with no weapons. But after what Vexthul had just seen, he knew this human was more dangerous than any army. The two commanders met in Vexthul's private office. Vexthul was tall and thin with purple skin and 4 arms. Jake was shorter and looked ordinary, like any human you might meet on any street. But his eyes were calm and intelligent. Sit, Vexthul said, pointing to a chair. Jake sat down and looked at the alien commander. You wanted to conquer Earth, Jake said. You wanted to destroy every human colony in space. You brought 10,000 ships to do it. What changed your mind? Vexthul was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You changed my mind. One ship, one crew. You defeated the greatest fleet in our history. We did not defeat your fleet, Jake said. Your fleet defeated itself. We just helped it along. How? Vexthul asked. How did you do what you did? Your ship was outnumbered 10,000 to 1. Your technology should not have been powerful enough. Your tactics made no sense. Jake smiled. That is exactly why we won. You expected us to fight like you fight. You expected us to follow rules and use standard tactics. But humans do not fight that way. Then how do humans fight? We fight with chaos, Jake said. We take things that should not work and make them work. We look at problems from directions that no one else thinks of. We change our plans in the middle of battle. We use our enemy's strengths against them. Vexthul nodded slowly. Your ship, the technology you used, it was not just advanced. It was different. It worked in ways that should be impossible. The technology was a combination of human creativity and alien science, Jake explained. We took machines that other species built and use them in ways they never imagined. We connected systems that were never meant to work together. We did things that your computer models said were impossible. The artificial intelligence, Vexthal said. Phoenix. It was more than just a computer. Phoenix is a bridge between human intuition and artificial logic, Jake said. Phoenix can think like a computer and feel like a human. That combination is something no other species has ever created. Vexthal stood up and walked to a window that looked out at the debris field. Captain Morrison, I have been fighting wars for 50 years. I have conquered dozens of worlds. I have never seen anything like what happened today. Good, Jake said. Then you understand why you should not attack human space again. Yes, Vexthal said quietly. I understand. Jake stood up. I am going to return to my ship now. You are free to go back to your empire. Tell your leaders what happened here today. Tell them that humans are not the weak species they thought we were. What will you tell your leaders? Vexthal asked Jake. Thought about that question. I will tell them that we have announced ourselves to the galaxy. Every species out there will hear about this battle. Some will want to be our friends. Others will want to destroy us before we become too powerful. Either way, everything has changed. As Jake walked toward the door, Vexthal called after him. Captain Morrison, may I ask you something? Yes. Do you have more ships like the Defiant? Jake turned around and smiled. What do you think? He left without answering the question. Back on the Defiant, Jake's crew was working to restore power to their ship. Don had managed to get the engines running again, but it would be days before all. Systems were fully operational. Captain, Amy said, I am getting messages from Earth. Admiral Blake wants a full report. Jake sat down in his captain's chair. Around him, his bridge was still dark, except for emergency lighting. But outside, among the wreckage of the enemy fleet, they had won the most important victory in human history. Phoenix, Jake said. Are you still there? I am here, Captain, Phoenix replied. Though I am running on backup power at the moment. What you did today, what we all did together, it worked better than anyone hoped. Yes, Phoenix said. But Captain, there is something you should know. What we did today will change more than just this war. Every species in the galaxy will study this battle. They will try to understand how we defeated so many ships with just one. Will they figure it out? Jake asked. Some of them will, Phoenix said, but it will not help them. What we did today was not just about technology. It was about thinking differently. It was about being human. Jake looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, news of this battle was already spreading. Alien governments were calling emergency meetings. Military leaders were trying to understand what had happened. Scientists were studying the wreckage, looking for clues. Lisa, Jake said, send a message to Admiral Blake. Tell her that the mission was successful. The Zephyrian fleet has been neutralized. Yes, sir, Lisa said. What should I say about casualties? Jake thought about the 10,000 enemy ships that had been destroyed. Then he thought about his own crew, tired but alive and unhurt. Tell her we suffered no casualties, Jake said. 3 days later, the Defiant limped back to Earth. Word of their victory had already reached home. When Jake and his crew stepped off their ship, they were greeted by Admiral Blake and a crowd of reporters. Captain Morrison, Admiral Blake said, I need a full debriefing on the Prometheus Protocol. Yes, ma'am, Jake said. But first, I think you should know that everything has changed. We are not hiding from the galaxy anymore. After today, everyone out there knows what humans can do. Admiral Blake nodded. Are you ready for what comes next? Jake looked up at the sky, where stars were just becoming visible in the evening light. Somewhere among those stars, alien species were making decisions about humanity's future. Some would try to make friends. Others would try to destroy Earth before humans became too powerful. "We are as ready as we can be," Jake said. "But Admiral, there is something else. What we did out there, it was not just the technology. It was not just the weapons or the ship. It was the crew. It was human creativity and stubbornness and the refusal to give up." "I know," Admiral Blake said. "That is why I chose you and your crew for this mission. Then you should also know that we cannot do this alone. One ship, one crew. We can win one battle. But if we are going to survive what comes next, we need more ships like the Defiant. We need more crews willing to do the impossible." "Admiral," Blake smiled. "Captain Morrison, did you really think the Defiant was the only ship we built?" Jake stared at her. "Mom, the Prometheus Protocol was tested on 12 ships, Captain. Yours was just the first to see combat. The other 11 are already out there, waiting for orders." For the first time since the battle began, Jake Morrison felt hope. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. Now the real work would begin, but as he looked up at the stars, Jake knew one thing for certain: the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.